Hi, I just wanted to make a short update video regarding some work I've been doing on the side. So I made a tool that allows me to do rapid prototyping for sprites that I'm making on the side. I'm allowing myself more time to focus on the software aspect, but from time to time I like to get my hands a little dirty in the art so I can just kind of not lose enthusiasm, and I made this tool to make it easier to do that, funny enough. And I think anyone could find a little bit of value in this if you're interested in doing some rapid prototyping. So what I did was I distilled much of the components that aren't related to animation away from my engine and created a separate tool that allows you to just upload a sprite sheet, calibrate it by a couple of parameters within the actual code base, and then execute it. And what you're looking at right now is one such case. I took the code for one of the infantry units in the actual game engine and just tweaked it a little bit so that I can operate with a sprite that's running with a different number of sprites in the sheet and a different size and a different speed. So let me go ahead and show you the changes I made to get that accomplished. So given that the texture's in the appropriate location and named appropriately, in this case it's under textures of wherever my project root is. Unit 1 is the one that I care about. That's RM Unit 1B, so that doesn't ever make any confusion. And I have a 2-level hierarchy for object inheritance, very basic. Base unit and infantry unit, you only have to update the infantry unit class. In the actual constructor method, you find references to numSprite, sprite offset, sprite timer, and sprite trigger. So numSprite is a reference to how many sprites are in my sprite sheet. I have 10 sprites in my sprite sheet of Mega Man, so I give it the value of 9 because I use a 0 indexing scheme for the sprite sheets. I give the offset 0. I have never found a use case to give a different offset, but all that says is when you start the routine of drawing animation, the starting point should be at point 0, and when I draw or make sprite sheets, 0 is always going to be the starting location of the animation. If you have a different flavor of animation, you like the beginning to be at the very end of the sprite sheet, etc., this is where you would modify the code to accommodate that. Sprite timer is kind of a variable that you don't have to touch. It just needs to be initialized here. Sprite timer is part of this timer trigger scheme that I use for timing all throughout my game. And trigger is what we would consider the cooldown. So for those who are interested, you can go into many discussions about capping time, making it variable, fixed rates, etc. And you can use the same scheme. What you need to know as a potential user of this tool is that it's just a area where you can modify the speed. 1 is fast, 5 is slower. It doesn't really have a cap on how slow it can be, but it is a natural number scheme, so it can't handle decimals, can't handle negative numbers, so 1 is the fastest you can go. If what you saw operating at the value of 1 was not fast enough, then you have to calibrate your frame, and that's done in the actual game engine, not the object. So that's beyond the discussion. To give you a little bit of information about this trigger, the trigger is looking for the cooldown for a frame, usually nanoseconds, to be reached, and then that iterates the counter for the timer until it hits the timer trigger, and then it resets at 0 and it upgrades the offset from 0 to 1, and then once it hits 9, the number of sprites, it comes back around to 0. So you modify those values according to the scheme I just described. I slowed it down, and in the actual game engine, I found a to-do for me, but in the game engine itself, what I found was that you can choose to migrate this to the object. I think it's better, but right here is where you want to update the X and Y parameters of your sprite sheet. The sprite sheet for Mega Man is bigger than the one in the infantry unit for the turn-based battle game I'm making. So 41 is the width. The parameters for this function in rectangle are X, Y, width, height. and the height of the sprite sheet for Mega Man is 60 in this case. So you update those, and that's really it. You make it. In this case, I'm rebuilding it because I did adjust the speed, and you should expect to see it go a little bit more slowly, and there we have a slower drawing of Mega Man running. It's again a tool used to give you kind of a rapid prototyping, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Here you can see the spacing of the sprite within the sprite sheet isn't perfect, but it doesn't matter. That's all I got for now. Thank you for tuning in.